Good evening, everyone. I hope you're well. My name is Stacy from EmpowerWiz, and I would like to welcome you to today's session, where we'll be talking about helping our children to deal with fear and rejection. So we're going to explore strategies to help our children deal with these problems, and these crucial topics are very important and essential for our children's overall development. So with this, we aim to provide practical tools and insights to support our kids in navigating these challenges effectively, and in general, to empower them. So thank you very much for taking your time and joining us in this call. And at this point, I would like to welcome our today's speaker, who is Nora Nyamache, who is also our CEO and founder, to go on with the session. Thank you. Welcome, Nora.
Thank you, Stacy. And thanks everyone for making the time on a cold Thursday after work. I can see some of my colleagues: Clara Karibu, Avad Karibu, Pal Karibu, John, Joy, Merab, and Vera. Thank you so much for coming and making it on time. I'm sure some people are still making their way through traffic. And the conversation that we want to have today is something we do on a monthly basis. We try to cover certain topics that affect children, but it's not that these topics do not affect us as adults. And by and large, what we try and do as EmpowerWiz is to give children a voice through educating the adults in their lives in better ways to empower these children. And today our topic is fear and rejection. I'm sure each of you has, at one time or another, experienced that feeling, that fear when some people say I'm nervous or I'm feeling anxious, and that's usually just being afraid. And for in other scenarios where now there's rejection, it's actually when you've sought out a connection or something like a job application, and then the object of that connection turns us down. So rejection can happen for children, it can be small incidences, and for adults, it can be big things like when you apply for a promotion at work, or when you're seeking a relationship with another adult. But each of us experiences fear and rejection at different times. Fear, in terms of definition, is that unpleasant emotion that's caused by the threat of danger, pain, or harm. And so fear of rejection would then be that being afraid to put yourself out there and wanting so much to be accepted that the fear outweighs the possibility of the reward of acceptance. And the opposite of that fear of rejection is feeling accepted and probably approved. And I think for children, the adults in their lives can be the foundation of how a child experiences certain scenarios in their life, how fearful a child can get. And some of us today, where we operate from, whether it's at work, or in the spaces we are in, at church, at school, we're probably still healing from past experiences. So the conversation today is just for us to interact with each other and see how, as a community, we can then empower our kids through helping them in terms of handling fear of rejection. To start us off, the core belief in terms of fear and rejection is basically someone feeling that they are unacceptable, they are not likable, they are not good enough the way they are. So a sense of feeling that maybe you're worth less than you thought before the event of being rejected. And I wanted to explore a few myths. There's quite a few myths out here around this topic. One of the myths is rejection means you are not good enough. And I think as a culture, I feel like we push this agenda more, and for those of us who grew up in the 70s, 80s, I think when you presented something maybe to your parents and they rejected it or said it wasn't good enough, that feeling of rejection actually embodied who you felt you were, that you were not good enough. And the truth is, it's not true that when you're rejected that you're not good enough. And a good example that we've all seen on the internet is the Walt Disney, who was fired for lack of imagination and good ideas. And there are many more examples around people who dealt with rejection but took it positively and made good things out of it. The other myth is that rejection ends. You know, I think people think that it's something you can deal with, and at some point there'll be no more rejection, which is not true. Because in life, we'll always be trying new things, going into new spaces, new jobs, seeking out new partnerships, new connections. So really, rejection is a long life thing and it does not end. So as human beings, we're just always striving to deal with rejection better and also deal with the fear and go out there and try new things. And you've seen even, for those of you who are at work, sometimes you want to do a presentation and as soon as you're getting ready to start, you start shaking. And sometimes you ask yourself, I've been doing this for years. Why am I feeling fearful? Because you don't know how your audience will receive you. The third myth, as I just hand it over back to Stacey, is that fear is a weakness. I think a lot of people look at fear as, you know, if you're fearful, you're a weak person. And it's not true, because fear is natural, it's necessary, and it's actually a vital tool for survival. You know, think about, if you saw a lion coming and you didn't fear and you just sat there. So it is not a weakness, and at one point or another, we all experience fear. Now, the fear that an adult experiences could be for bigger events. But in a child's life, if they're feeling fearful and they're being rejected, that event is just as big in their lives. I want to pause there and hand it back to you, Stacey, as we continue welcoming more people. Thank you, Fred, Kendi, Janet, Kiguta. I see all of you. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. Stacey? Damaris, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Nora. So, with that, we have the WhatsApp community. I've posted the link on the chat. You can join us on the community. We have a poll there that is ongoing, so you can answer some of the questions that we have there on fear and rejection. And yes, as we continue. So thank you. Laura?
Yes, thank you, Stacey. And I think what we were saying earlier is, as Empowerwiz, our main goal is to raise empowered kids. And we do that by interacting with the audiences, which is the parents and guardians who take care of the children in the community. And I speak not from a place of an expert, but I've been a parent for 19 years and I've interacted with quite a few children. And it's actually very rewarding to interact with children and see the capacity in terms of how much they can grow, at least compared to us as adults. And so we're running a poll. If you can please click on the link that Stacey has put in the group and just give us your views around what you think on this topic, and then we can go from there. And in the meantime, I'd like to welcome everyone else who has just joined. Naomi, thank you for coming. Collins, thank you for coming. Damaris, I can see you. This topic of fear and the topic of rejection is something that holds us back on a daily basis. And it could be small things, some of the things you talk about, but some of the things you don't. So what we want to explore today is how to support our children in their daily experiences where they are then feeling either fearful and they're not able to try new things, or they have actually experienced rejection from a friend, from a relative, from a parent, from a peer, from from any of the quarters in which the child operates in. So please join the WhatsApp community, and we'd like your feedback so that we can just go over it in this session. So if you can just go to the link that Stacey has shared, and as we do that, I'm going to just talk about the causes of fear and rejection in children. And again, like I said earlier, we're all children of God, and a lot of the things we talk about that affect children today are probably things that affected us many years ago, and the impact of those things is just showing up now in our adult lives. So what we can do as a community is today be a better parent, be a better guardian, be a better mentor to a child who's maybe feeling lost and struggling with fear of rejection. So some of the signs, how you would know maybe a child has experienced rejection or is very fearful of rejection, is low self-esteem. The child could be overly clingy. They can be overly curious or overly shy. They can have a lot of trouble being left alone. And this child, as they mature, they then struggle to form and maintain healthy peer relationships. And we're not saying that there are no other factors that affect children in terms of how they interact with other kids or adults, because there is other things like maybe autistic children or other things that could be happening in the child's life. But fear of rejection or rejection in itself can actually cause the child to have these signs. So if you see a child maybe was talkative and suddenly is not talking, it could be they've had an experience. It could be an experience they had at school or at church. Or an example is that a kid goes up in church and sings, and then everybody laughs at them and they feel rejected and they walk away with their head hung, and you start to see that child behave differently from that day on. So there are many signs, and usually as the parent or the person who lives with the child, you're best placed to actually identify that this child has changed, and then probably investigate what are some of the recent events in that child's life. Just moving on to causes. Actually, research shows that the most important thing for any child is, being accepted. So what takes up a huge percentage of why a child would probably end up with a fear of rejection is being rejected in their childhood by parents, caregivers, or guardians. And basically, the fear then grows and the child becomes more vulnerable, both from present experiences and from past experiences. So for those of us who are adults and are dealing with this fear of rejection, it's probably from a past experience that we had, whether it was at home, at school, or whichever environment that we were in. The other thing, apart from parents and guardians rejecting a child, is rejection by peers. You can have all the confidence you have, but you could be a 5-year-old and you go outside to play and you're bullied. Or you have a difference in appearance. Maybe you're taller, maybe you're shorter, maybe you're darker, you're lighter, you might be of a different race. Unfortunately, there are some places where you could be of a different tribe or ethnicity, or you could be a disabled child. And especially in the African culture, a disabled child really struggles in terms of peer rejection. The other thing that would affect a child and cause fear of rejection in them is family dynamics, sibling rivalry, where one child is a star in the family, and this other child, every time they present an idea or their results from school, they seem to be shunned or compared to the other sibling. And this is usually driven by the adults in the children's lives. So the sibling rivalry and parental favoritism then takes to guide the child's interactions in the family, and eventually this child could end up with a low self-esteem and feeling that they're not good enough. Other things are, divorce, separation of parents, and it could be even parents who travel for long periods and are not home. Some of these things then cause the child as a family dynamic to maybe not feel as confident and have fear and fear of rejection. The other thing is the environments that our children are in. Sometimes it could be at school, it could be at church, it could be on a sports field where they are playing and they are, it could be football, it could be dancing, it could be anything that the child is involved in. And one of the emerging environments that has really become a big problem is online. There's a lot of rejection online where for these young kids, when they go online, they post something online, and you find that people are maybe not liking, either not enough people liking their content, or people disliking their content or making negative remarks. The online community now being a real community, and it's something as parents and guardians that we then have to start talking to our children about. There are parents who have found out that their child was being rejected online, and it was affecting, the child in the home, and they were not sure what was really going on in the child's life. And there's also physiological factors where a child could have, anxiety, depression, maybe from other things, and it causes them to have an extreme fear of rejection. The conversation we're having today is to see how do we then help children in first dealing with fear, and for any of the events they go through, like when they are rejected, it doesn't leave them in a place where they either do not want to try new things in future, or they basically shut down and do not want to be rejected again, and they live in just this constant fear. Stacey, I don't know if you can report from the group if we've gotten any responses from the poll, and maybe I'd like to pause there and we can explore. For those who joined us a bit late, we also explored the core belief around fear and rejection is that you are not likable, you are not good enough, and that you're defective or unacceptable. And just imagine that in a child's life and how big it is. Think of a teenager who's maybe going through puberty and they feel that they're not good enough or they're defective. Yeah? And how then in our homes do we help these children from a young age? It could be as simple as a crying baby who is being ignored. And this child basically starts experiencing rejection before they can even speak. And as they grow older, as parents and guardians, we are very important in how then this child interact with other people. So the first signs of fear and rejection usually happen from home, even before the child goes out into the society. Even some of our family setups, you might have a family setup where your child is constantly rejected by their own relatives. And it's something that we need to, one, spot it in a child, that what's happening to this child, and then try and help the child to overcome that fear. Some of the scenarios that children go through, like sports activities, where maybe they try so hard, they go to an event and they want it to be first, and there's a selection of maybe the top 3 and they're not selected. Those are things that we cannot prevent in life. And the goal is how do we then engage our children in a positive way and allow them to be able to go back to that sports event and go and try again, and maybe the 4th, the 5th time come out as winners. So that fear of rejection is what basically holds most of us back from doing the next thing in our lives. So it's not only in children's lives, but also for us as adults. Before I move to Stacy, I'm requesting that you join from your phone so that I think I lost connection because we were both joined on EmpowerWiz. Before we move to, I can see time is well spent and it's 7. Before we move to talking about tips to help our children in dealing with fear of rejection, maybe Stacy, you can just tell us if you have any responses and what are some of the feedback that we've gotten. We can also take this chance for those of us who have comments, questions, you can raise your hand and we can give you an opportunity to speak. Stacy? Stacy, go ahead. So I'm also looking out for any hands that are raised. Yes, Kiguta. Kiguta, go ahead as Stacy is getting ready.
So the question I have is something you spoke about, sibling rivalry. And this happens especially when you have a different able child, be it in terms of their education performance, as Nora said, when they are rejected, when they do things outside. So my question is, how do you deal with that? Especially now that you need to deal with the third party. It is not actually the child who has it's not the child who is rejecting himself, it's being rejected by others. How do you deal with the others? And then when you have established that a child has an issue of rejection, how do you deal with disciplining that child? Because I've seen in several instances when you establish a child has an issue, they tend to be babysitted, and as you know, children sometimes they take advantage, and you find like this child is somehow receiving some preferential treatment at home, and this can actually affect the other children. So I think those are my 2 or 3 comments. Nora, I don't know whether you heard me.
Kiguta, I'll try and handle what I heard. I think you were asking on a situation where a child has been bullied outside and it's actually the other people who are rejecting the child. So there are 2 ways to look at it. Sometimes it's what's within your control. Like, for example, if a child was walking down a road and somebody came and screamed at them, "You're so ugly," and they come home and they're crying, yeah? There's various reactions as parents that we could have. Some parents will say, you don't even know who that person is. Why would you believe them? And that would totally ruin that child. Because what you have just done is basically the same thing that the person down the road has done to that child. So the way that you handle your child after they're rejected, especially when you have no control over the third parties, is very crucial. And this builds over time, yeah? Another example is maybe it's at school and a child raised up their hand and said an answer, and then the teacher said something negative. And the child comes home and tells you, "I'm so sad today, Teacher Nora, when I raised my hand, I got really embarrassed. My answer was not good enough. I don't want to go back to school." Part of the things, and we're going to talk about these strategies later, there's a lot in just how safe the child feels to come and actually let you know what happened. There's some of us parents, at least where I grew up, I couldn't go to my parents when I was rejected because I think it was the agenda that was pushed is you only come to us when you're doing something good, when you're shining, and if you're rejected, it was almost made to seem like, yes, maybe you need to do better. The other thing is sometimes we can be, as parents, give very maybe answers that don't make sense to children. Take time to give examples. Give a child an age-appropriate example of how you think they could have dealt with rejection. Like basically, it's a singing competition, and if a child goes on stage and they're told they're not good enough, maybe let them know that they can say thank you for the opportunity to participate in the competition. And that allows the child to then go back and say, I can try again. And I think the other thing that, again, I'm going to refer to my generation, the people who are almost 50, we did not grow up with a space where we were allowed to process rejection gradually, maybe cry over it, and think through what we could do better. I think we were rushed through these experiences, and some of that affects us to date. And you'll find some of us parents telling a child, that's not something to cry about. Move on with your life. Yeah, you'll try again, and it's, you have a home to come to, and you don't need to worry that you were rejected. Or when the child is feeling very fearful, you push them and you say, come on, the other children are trying. You need to go and try. But we need to take a step back and check. Are we maybe operating from the place where we were parented? Where sometimes, of course, there's a strategy that they say, push somebody into the deep end and they'll learn how to swim. How can we help our children gradually from the shallow end, such that by the time they reach the deep end and they're dealing with life's challenges, they're able to then deal better than we did? And I think the goal for us as parents and guardians is to change the narrative and not to always refer to things like, Mimi, when I was rejected when I was young, I didn't even come to tell my parents. You're making a very big deal out of small things. Children are going through online rejections where they're saying, I don't know why people are not liking my picture. I posted it yesterday and I only have 2 likes. And sometimes we end up telling the child, hata sijui unafanya nini online? That is what you get online. So what are some of the critics we are to our children, the inner critics, and they end up hearing our voices when they're being rejected out here? Or are we the parents who every time the child is rejected, they know I can go back home and I'm accepted there, I'm loved, I'm secure, I'm safe, and I'll be heard. And through these experiences that are supportive to the child, you're then able to build a child who's resilient and who's able to face the world in a better way and probably try more things than we are. And to be honest, even when I look at the courage that some of the young adults in my life have, I must admit, I think they handle things a lot better than I did at my age. I remember when I was going to high school and I could not even say my name because I just feared that maybe my accent or the way I looked, coming from the village, I wouldn't be accepted. And that fear actually stifled my voice. I could not speak. Yeah? How many of us are in that situation today where you're told to make a presentation and you just can't get yourself to stand on stage and make a presentation? And this is possibly from past experiences of rejection and living in that extreme fear. So I'd like to take a few more comments. We have about 10 minutes. I hope that, I know it's a wide topic and we have a lot that we can cover. And our goal is actually to cover even the same topics on request from our audience. So I hope that we've been able to cover most of what you would think about when thinking about rejection, about fear, and about fear of rejection. So before I conclude, I would like to take a few more comments. And for those of you who are in the room who are better placed on to advise on this topic, karibuni sana to give us your comments. As I said earlier, I'm not an expert. I just speak from 19 years of parenting experience, and some of them have been character developing, but I'm here today to share this conversation with all of you. So I'm going to pause there. Stacy, I don't know if you see any hands that I don't see. And also, if you're able to get any feedback from the poll, it's a good time to share it. This is to Stacy.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. So I have shared the poll. Reshared the poll, and they were around 6 questions. And from that, looking at the first question, which was, how often does your child express feelings of fear and rejection? Um, Four of the parents voted that it is occasionally. Their children occasionally express feelings of fear and rejection. The second question is about how confident are you in your ability to help your child manage fear and rejection. So some of the parents were somewhat confident. There was one who is neutral and one who is somewhat unconfident. The third question was, what methods do you currently use to help your child deal with fear and rejection? So we had 4 methods in this case. The first one was talking and listening to them, which has a majority of the parents who have said that is what they do. Then two of them encourage positive thinking, and from that, none goes to seek professional help, that is from a therapist or a counselor, and also none reads books on the topics. Then the fourth question was, how effective do you find your current methods in helping your child manage their emotions? And some parents feel that their methods are effective, and we also have others who feel like their methods are neutral. So on the other question, we have, what is the biggest challenge uh, you face in helping your child deal with fear and rejection? So the two biggest challenges in this case are understanding their emotions, understanding the children's emotions, and finding the right approach. Yeah, and there was also one who said that the challenge is managing their own emotions. And
Wow.
yes,
Wow. Thank you, Stacy. And Stacy, thank you so much for putting this together too. I think I want to appreciate the authenticity with which we have shown up to answer those questions. And I think in terms of one of the challenges that I think I alluded to is the challenge of how I was raised myself. And I don't know how to process my emotions. And that's going to make it hard for me to help my child processing their emotions. What if, as a parent, I'm currently facing rejection? Or currently, I'm so fearful of being rejected that I'm not able to try what I'm trying. And now I have a child who needs my support. So, we're all human beings. And actually, I think Stacey mentioned that no one is seeking professional help. Sometimes there is no harm in seeking professional help. Yeah, sometimes as human beings, depending on the scenarios that life has placed us in and some of the choices that we have made in life, you can be in a situation where you're not able to support your child sufficiently. And the question you would ask, if I'm not able to process my emotions, am I good enough to, maybe project this frustration that I have on my child, or would I rather seek support? And it doesn't have to be professional support. It can be support from a sibling, a sister, a brother, an uncle, a mentor, a neighbor, someone that you trust, who you could say, look, I'm having a challenge with my child, and it seems I'm struggling to process, to help them process their emotions. Could you help me? I think one of the things that we need to normalize is asking for help. So I really appreciate the feedback that you all have given. And I think in terms of the challenge, I would say it's something we underestimate what role we play in our kids' lives. The role we play is so important, and you'll be surprised those small interactions when your child walks in the door, when they come, crying or screaming and they're sad, how you handle that child forms such a big part of who they become in future. And, in terms of professional help, when you realize that at many times you're not in a good position to handle your child when they come with these emotions, probably it's also a good time to seek professional help ourselves, because we find that we have trauma and things that we didn't deal with, and that is how we're showing up as parents. Yeah, so thank you so much for the feedback. I'd like to encourage all of us to join the WhatsApp community for us to interact and share ideas. And I notice we are just about 3 minutes to closing. I'd like to conclude with 2 quotes that I feel really speak to me in terms of this topic. One is a quote by Jocelyn Soriano: "To be rejected by someone does not also mean you should reject yourself. Be your own advocate at all times. Love yourself, advocate for yourself, and do not reject yourself because you've been rejected." And the question is, how do we then teach our children not to reject themselves because of an experience they've had? Kiguta, I'm just going to read through this Marianne Williamson quote. It's a bit long, but I'll try and be fast. "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people will not feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to manifest the glory of God that is within us. It is not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Kiguta, you can go ahead. I'm done with my presentation, and I'm not sure, Kiguta, if you put down your hand or you had something
Thank
to
you,
say.
Nora. I still just wanted to speak, and sorry for dominating the conversation.
Not a
But I just wanted to mention something that you have touched on, and I just wanted to put it from my personal experience. And this is about seeking professional help. I had one of my children, he was not good in school. So we used to think that he's a victim of COVID, because he had just joined school when COVID came, and generally his concentration levels were very low. So during COVID, it reached a point, because he could not even concentrate, we withdrew him from the online classes because they were not working for us. So when COVID was over and children went back to school, it was very hard for him to catch up. And as I said, he had just joined school, so he was so much behind. And then after COVID, the school he was in previously was closed, so we had to change him school. And the school he went were all doing online classes, and they were just catching up from where they were. So what we did is we really tried a lot of interventions. And the first intervention we did, from our own understanding, was to make him repeat PP1. And actually we discussed with the teachers from the new school, and they agreed that he has to repeat. But when we sat down and thought about it, we spoke to someone. As you said, we seek professional help from a friend. The friend referred us to a professional person who came and did some tests on him. And the first thing he told us is that the worst thing we can do is to make him to repeat the classes. So he actually just interviewed him, did a lot of tests on him, and she actually noted that the child had mild dyslexia. So from that now, because we got professional counseling, we were now able to manage the situation from point of information. And I can confirm right now the child is okay. very confident, and I think there the professional help worked. So when I heard that no one mentioned the professional help as one of the interventions, I think I would encourage parents to take that professional advice seriously.
Wow, thank you, Kiguta. That is so powerful. And, that is coming from a parent who, some of us had never heard of dyslexia. And because we as a culture are so averse to experiencing these, quote unquote disabilities, we tend to rule them out as the child being difficult or the child just not concentrating. Meanwhile, the child is dealing with something else. Some children have even been known to have, to be hard of hearing. And the teacher was basically saying that the child does not listen in class. The child is hard of hearing. So professional help is basically all the interventions that you would bring in, including counseling and seeing someone who can help. I'd like to invite Zippy, who's actually a professional in the area of counseling, to give us her comments. Zippy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, all. I didn't mean to infringe on your time, but I just wanted to piggyback right on the last passage that you read. The whole time, and even this morning over here where I am, it's lunchtime. This morning, as I did my counseling, it sort of culminated into that sense of self-compassion. But it shouldn't even start at self-compassion, because self-compassion is actually an act of humility from you to yourself, because you have empathy and you see yourself as a human being. It should really start from that vantage point of knowing that you're a human being who's just as deserving as any other human being. And as you embrace your child, you would have first embraced yourself. It's if I can use the analogy of when you are caught in life's crisis, caught up in that, you want to first secure yourself before you try to secure your child. We always get that little lecture before we take flights, that first fit on your mask and life gear, saving gear before you fit on the one for your child or anyone else you're supporting. So, and that's something I'm telling myself as much as I'm just encouraging you all here on this forum. And thank you so much, Nora, for initiating this. It's powerful. Thanks.
Thank you, Zippy. And I think I'll also emphasize what Kiguta has said, what Zippy has said. Professional support and seeking professional help is not a weakness. It is something that has saved many of us. We've been through many hours of counseling to be where we are today. And I've just remembered an experience I had when I was in primary school, back in the village in a boarding school, and I couldn't see the board. And so I kept, squinting, and I was known to be a naughty child and all that. And, my father was told I'm naughty. Come to find out, all this time, I had an issue with my eyes. All I needed was glasses to be able to see the board. So again, seeking these interventions around, is the child hard of hearing? Is it that the child has a vision impairment issue? Do they have some kind of, deformity or an issue in terms of how they've developed that they're not able to catch up? And instead of letting the child go through this rejection and various scenarios where they're not having a good time, you then are able to put these interventions in place. Stella, please go ahead. Just give us a few more minutes, maybe another 5 as we wrap up. Stella?
Hey, just something I came across online, yeah? One of these vocal Gen Zs in the mandamanos that are going on, yeah, was being interviewed. Then he went on to say, when he moved from, he was brought up in Nairobi. He managed to go to a national school, can I just call it first tier national school? When he went there, because he comes from a family that was struggling financially, he really struggled to fit in. So he was always in trouble. He didn't want to sit with poor people and all that. Then he was finally expelled from that school. He went to a second tier national school away from Nairobi, and when he went there, he was really able to thrive and came up tops himself. Do the choices we make for our children, right? I'm still. How do you, as a parent, how do you deal with that? You think you're giving your child your best, yeah, taking them to the best school that you're trying to, giving them the best things, and yet you're actually doing them a disservice. I don't know how people feel about that. Yeah, that's something I've really been thinking about.
Wow, Stella, thank you for raising that. And I would believe that most of us in this room have had a situation where you felt that you were making a good decision for your child. It turned out wrong. And I'll give my personal experience. I went to boarding from when I was in class 4. I must have been 9 years old. Being in the village, going to boarding was the real deal. Like, you got shoes to wear, you got your own toothbrush, which was a luxury back in the village. And so I really cried and asked for many, I believe from class 1, I was asking, I want to go to boarding school. Also in boarding school, you don't get to go to the shamba. So in my scenario, going to boarding is something I was dying to do. But when I got to boarding school and I got to, experience the other kids there, I experienced quite some rejection. People would ask me, why are your hands like that? Because we used to pluck tea. And then I kept asking myself, is this something I really wanted? I remember going back to my mother and saying, the school has many snakes and I'd like to leave. And she sat down with me and she really tried to find out if I was telling the truth around the snakes. And eventually I told her people were making fun of me, and that's really what I wanted to leave the school about. And she explained to me that is just a challenge. And I think I have to thank my mother because she was very supportive in that journey. By the time I was going to high school, I was so resilient that I remember just looking at people crying in high school and wondering, okay, So in terms of the choices we make, how often as parents do we review those choices? Because I took my kids to boarding school in high school and it did not work out. But I did not hesitate to pull them out because it wasn't working out. And they're doing well now because, we were able to establish that this environment was not aligned with who they were. So as opposed to maybe pushing our children and believing and having the good intention that we've made good choices for them, how often do we review our choices with the adults in our lives and even with the children themselves? How often do you get feedback from your child about that wonderful school you took them to that you're paying a lot of school fees? Have you asked them what their experience is with the other children? Have you asked them, how are the teachers, how are the interactions? Have you asked them if they're able to practice the sports that they so much love or, their religion? Yeah, all these things then is what builds the safety that your child will have in you to come and review that choice that you have so intentionally, so positively made as a parent. So let's take time to be vulnerable to our own choices and say, maybe this was not a good decision after all, and be okay with changing course. Yeah. So, and the kids of these days are open enough. I don't think we spoke even when we were asked, growing up. But surely today, when you interact most of our children, they will tell you that I'm not a happy camper, and this is what I need your help from. And you're able to work with the child, and they can maybe even thrive eventually in the same environment, or you change them, like Kibuta's story, where the interventions they put in place have the child thriving now because they understand the child better. I don't know if ZP, your hand is up.
Sorry, I didn't mean to keep it up. I'm sorry.
That's fine. We call it's an old hand. On a light note, ZP. So I want to thank each and every one of you for making the time after a busy work day on an evening, just being here to have this conversation. We will post the recording on our YouTube channel for your friends, relatives, and your network to access. We're also on social media. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. YouTube has all our videos at length. And we are happy to take feedback from you on topics that you'd like covered. Usually during the month on our socials, we cover a topic and it culminates into this webinar where we then try to thrash it out and have this conversation with like-minded individuals. The goal is for us to build a community, an Empoweries community, where we can empower children and give them a voice. Give them a way to be able to do better, maybe better than we did, and using strategies that were not used by our parents, but that we're happy to learn together. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you. I see the comments. Thank you so much. I want to thank my colleagues from ABSA for coming. I'm a banker by day, but my passion is working with children. And I look forward to having more of these sessions with yourselves. Please do not have fear to let us know what your thoughts are. Do not fear to raise your points in these forums. Let us drive this lack of fear, or at least, learning from our experiences and being better individuals, and in that way being better parents and supporting our children better. So today, the question I'd like you to go home with is, how better can I support my child? And what help might I need myself for me to be able to show up better in matters fear and rejection? And what is that thing that maybe I need to go and try out today and share it with my child? That I was very fearful to do this, but I've finally done it. And celebrate with your child. That allows the child to also see you as a human being, as somebody who can fail, who can try again, and somebody who has been able to get to where they would want to get to. Thank you so much for coming. As I said, we'll post this online for those of us who have joined late or were not able to catch the whole conversation. We will post it on the YouTube channel, and please follow us for more of such tidbits on parenting on our social media handles, and feel free to reach out to me. For those of you who would like to reach out personally, my number is 0700306350. Stacey, you can post my number. Thank you, Joey Rahab. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. It is 7:45. I apologize for going over by 15 minutes, but I believe we've all learned something, or we've all been able to talk about something that maybe we need to talk about more often. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
You too, my sister.
Thank you.
Thank you, my sister. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pal. Thank you for always coming. Thank you, Amy. Thank you. Thank you, Stella.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vio.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Kiguta, thank you so much. You have to attend all our webinars. Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing with us. Thank you. And for those who are fearful, please continue joining this conversation. Kendi, thank you for coming. We really appreciate. Sandra, thank you so much for coming. Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you so much, pal. Thank you.